The climb had been, as Mathis said, at least for the first portion. As the pathway switched back on itself to climb higher, Taya started to feel the strain of the incline as it also increased. There were several more switchbacks, and as they rounded the fifth turn, the wall of the tunnel suddenly cracked and opened up to fall away. Mathis lost his footing as he sailed over the edge with a howl, and his satchel slipped down his arm to catch his wrist. Taya reached forward, grabbed the old man's closest hand, and blinked, but the satchel had flown loose just before the two of them found themselves away from the ledge. Mathis shrieked and reached out for the leather sack and gripped the bottom of the bag by the tips of his fingers. That was when a thickly bound journal slipped out and flew over the cliff. Again, Mathis shrieked, but the book was gone. Taya stepped up to the ledge, peered over, and looked at the book as it fell and fell into the vast, deep cavern. The bottom lit up in places with an eerie red and orange glow. A warm and humid wind filled the passage as she then reached out and gripped the air. The book vanished. Mathis scurried up to look over just as she closed her hand. "Did you save it?" "In a sense." She dug around in her lining and pulled out one of her metal stars to show Mathis. "All of my recalled items have been previously touched." "What are you saying? You can't bring it back?" Taya slowly shook her head as Mathis stood in confused resignation. "I'm fairly certain we need that book. Someday I might figure out how to get it back, along with everything else I've lost. But today's not that day." She put a hand on his shoulder as she put the star back and started to walk him forward. "Thanks for saving me," he said. "Of course I saved you. I mean, after what happened before I left on the expedition, I thought I was done for." "Look, Mathis," Talia shouldered into him. "That was a long time ago, and besides, I learned a lesson from it. No sense dwelling in the past. So consider yourself forgiven." At that, she decided to change the subject. "How long have we been going up?" she asked to take his mind off the book and the past. "Quite a long time, maiden," he answered, sullen. "I did not think the Hersog Golvan was this tall." "It isn't," he picked up his pace. "But, strange place, eh?" "Strange place." She looked down into the open chasm while they passed. As the pathway became enclosed once more, it also became tighter and steeper and shorter between turns. Soon there were solidly carved steps beneath their feet, and the tunnel gave way to a carved-out stairwell. The steps had been carved up the side of the wall in such a way as to look impossible to keep footing on, and then back down again after a little distance. But when they reached that section of the flight, Mathis just kept walking, and Taya watched him lean with no need to steady himself as he walked across the wall. She followed him onward. The disorienting stairway just kept twisting around the interior of the well until it leveled out at a threshold. Beyond the threshold, a wide room opened up. The room encircled a water well surrounded by pillars, flanked on either side by two spiraling stairwells. "We're here." Mathis turned around and gestured to the room with both hands. "Heliodum?" Taya looked around with curiosity. "I thought you said it was down in Melamu." "We are down in Melamu," he answered. 3 more flights up the right stairwell's ground level, and the rest of the temple. "Where does the left stairwell lead?" She was still trying to grasp what Mathis had just said. "1 flight up is an interesting room, large with a vaulted ceiling. Directly downstairs from there is the gateway. Hopefully the accommodations I set up on the 2nd level are still there." "You've been living here?" "I've not stayed here for a long time." He made his way to the right stairwell, and Talia followed him up. "It's here that I learned of the great tree, and I haven't been back since." "You should have stayed away, old man!" The harsh voice boomed from behind Talia and Mathis as it echoed throughout the well. The two turned to look down the stairs and recoiled in fright as a massive, maroon-feathered serpent entered the bottom of the stairwell. The Saharu's ruby eyes glowed up at them as he slithered his way up the stairs. Quickly, he closed the distance, but Taya and Mathis broke out into a sprint up the steps. They quickly gained distance from the serpent as Taya dug around for metal stars. They rounded a corner of the stairwell. Talia turned and flung the stars with all her might from one hand and recalled them in mid-flight with the other hand. "Is that him?" They continued to rush along. "That's him. He's a bit angry at you." The serpent rounded the corner. As Talia looked over her shoulder, she forced the stars to return with a snap of her fingers. 3 sailed right past the Saharu, while 1 sliced past his ribs. He screeched and slowed down. "Thought you said you had lots of stuff stocked away." Realization flashed in Talia's eyes as Mathis reminded her. "Right!" Not looking back, she threw her arms into the air. A rain of potted plants, dead potted plants, began to fall from above and fly across at the height of Talia's own head. She dipped and dodged, and she pulled Mathis along to do the same. Several hit their mark to shatter over the Saharu's head, slowing him even more. "What in the world?" Mathis hollered. "The kids like to test me when they think I'm not looking." In seconds, they had reached ground level. Now it was Mathis who grabbed Talia's wrist, and he pulled her toward the way out. But as the serpent exited the stairwell, he coiled up and struck at them like lightning. Thunder followed as his voice cracked the air. "Mathis!" Ganon knocked Talia to the ground as his bulk rushed to catch the old man. As Talia rolled along with the impact, the Azek quickly shot to her feet, and she leapt headlong onto the serpent's back. But she was thrown clear just as quickly by an unseen hand as the serpent turned his attention on her. Again, he coiled, and as fast as lightning struck out at her. He grabbed her by the garments and, with unreal might, heaved her across the room. But he did not let go, and the back of Talia's suit ripped open. He sailed through the air as the torn rags of her clothing fell from Ganon's mouth. He watched her tumble across the floor to slide to a stop, and in an instant, he could see the darkened markings on her skin. His rage still brewed, but confused, he slowed his pace as he slithered up to her. He rose up to look down at the woman sprawled out on the ground. "My markings," he said under his breath. Talia rolled over flat on her back to look up at the frightful serpent. "Your markings?" The cold stone on her back made her sit upright. Ganon looked away from the woman and back to Mathis, who made no attempt to escape, then back to Talia. "What is this, old man?" he growled. "And where's my necklace, thief?" He backed away from Talia. "Talia!" Mathis motioned to her. "The crystal! Give it to Ganon!" Talia dug it out and placed it on the ground, silently and questioningly mouthing the word "thief" in Mathis's direction. Slowly she stood up to step back. Ganon, the Saharu, watched her with intensely red and burning eyes, with his plume of maroon feathers spread wide. "Ganon," Mathis spoke up, "this is Talia, daughter of Aaliyah Ra." He dared to step forward. The serpent burst out and lunged at Mathis. "Don't you dare say her name." "She's your daughter," he stammered as he lurched back. "You play a sick game with me?" the serpent bellowed as he pressed forward. Mathis fell backward to the ground and shielded himself. "I'm sorry I took the crystal, but I needed it to convince her." The serpent coiled him up and squeezed. "She is your daughter," Mathis squeaked. In a blink, Talia was beside them both. She grabbed Mathis, and in another blink, Ganon's coil collapsed in on itself as the two vanished. Ganon reeled back in surprise, and he looked around the empty space. Then he flinched in sudden recognition when Talia reappeared, alone and right in front of him. "What is this?" His eyes locked on the familiar lapis hues of her own. "It is crazy is what it is." She took up a stance ready to fight. "I do not know what is between you and the old man, but you have your crystal back, so it ends now." Ganon simply eased back and away and over to the crystal that lay on the ground. "And you?" He did not move to look at Talia. Instead, he kept his gaze on the crystal. "You are the daughter of Aaliyah? And supposedly yours as well." She looked over the torn clothing at her markings beneath. "You were surprised to see that I am marked. Why?" That was when he looked at her up and down. "Because they are the markings of a pilot, and no one on this world should possess such markings. But to entertain the idea that you are my flesh and blood." "Believe me, Saharu," she sneered as she also looked Ganon up and down. "Entertaining that idea is a difficult one for me too. But I have heard a whole host of unbelievable things in the past 3 days, and maybe it is crazy, but I'm starting to believe that it's all true." She looked at him in the eyes and softened up a bit. "Even this part about you and me." She dropped her defense, and she slowly inched her way toward the serpent. "Ganon." She reached out to him and took a long shot. "If it means anything to you, Mathis says he can work the gateway.